The heat at the Fresno County Fair was not merely a condition of the weather, it was a physical entity. It descended as a heavy, humid blanket, woven through with the cloying sweetness of spun sugar, the greasy perfume of deep-fried dough, and the raw, earthy tang of livestock, waiting in their dusty pens. The sun beat down, turning the asphalt pathways into soft, shimmering ribbons. It pressed upon the cheerful, unending babble of the crowd, 1,000 distinct conversations melting and merging into a single, pleasant drone. This drone was punctuated by the rhythmic, tinny jingles of carnival games and the distant, delighted screams from the midway rides that clawed at the bleached blue sky. Into this tapestry of high summer, a screech tore a jagged, ugly hole. "You, yes, you." The voice was a shard of broken glass thrown into the warm, thick air. It was high-pitched, vibrating with an indignation so pure and potent it felt meticulously manufactured, rehearsed for an audience. It sliced through the ambient drone silencing conversations in an immediate rippling wave of shock. Heads swiveled in unison, a tide of human curiosity washing over the sea of faces, all drawn toward the sudden disturbance. Every eye converged on a tableau vivant of simmering conflict staged near the livestock pens. A stout woman, her bleached blonde hair twisted into a punishingly tight bun that pulled at the corners of her eyes, was the source of the shriek. Her finger, trembling with a self-righteous fury, was aimed like a loaded pistol. Her target was a tall black man who stood with an almost preternatural calm, an island of stillness in the sudden vortex of attention. A gentle, patient smile still lingered on his lips, a remnant of the quiet conversation he had just been having with a small constellation of wide-eyed children gathered at his feet. The man was Sergeant Major Marcus Jones. He had folded 22 years of distinguished, often brutal military service into the quiet corners of his 45-year-old life, packing them away like old uniforms. He had been painting pictures with his words for the youngsters. He spoke not of violence, but of the unbreakable bonds of camaraderie forged in the crucible of dust and fire. He spoke of facing down fear, not with brute force, but with the quiet courage that comes from trusting the person next to you. He spoke of the profound, humbling honor in serving something larger than oneself. Just moments before the shriek, he'd pulled out a photograph. Its corners were soft, its colors faded by the passage of time and the touch of countless hands. It showed a group of grinning young men in desert camouflage, their arms slung around each other's shoulders, squinting under a punishing Kandahar sun. His unit, his brothers. A memory unbidden had surfaced with the photo. The choking dust, the scent of hot metal and cordite. The weight. The god-awful weight of another man's body slung over his shoulder, the slick feel of blood soaking through his own uniform. He could almost hear the desperate gasps for air from Sergeant Miller, whose leg had been torn open by shrapnel. "Don't you leave me, Marcus. Don't you dare." He had pushed the memory down, focusing on the children's innocent faces. It was a scar. He carried a story he would never tell them. "He's threatening people. The woman whose name the world would soon learn," was Karen sputtered out. Her face was a canvas of furious mottled red, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts, as if she'd run a marathon. She gestured wildly with her free hand, a sweeping, dramatic motion that encompassed the children at Marcus's feet, as if they were fragile exhibits in a museum she was duty-bound to protect. With that military talk. This is a family event. He needs to be removed. Now. A current of profound confusion rippled through the nearest onlookers. Marcus, genuinely taken aback, felt his patient smile falter, replaced by the slow, questioning arch of a single eyebrow. His internal calibration, honed by 2 decades of instant threat assessment in the deadliest places on Earth, spun uselessly. This was not an ambush. This was not an IED. This was a scenario not covered in any field manual. "Ma'am," he began, his voice a low, steady baritone that stood in stark, resonant counterpoint to her shrillness. "I was just speaking with these young folks about my time in the service. sharing a few experiences. He held his hands up slightly, palms open and visible. A gesture of peace. A gesture of de-escalation, learned in tense negotiations with village elders, not angry fairgoers. "Don't you lie to me." Karen's voice climbed another octave, cracking under the strain of its own vehemence. "I heard you all that. That soldier talk. It's intimidating. It's violent. My children are scared." She physically yanked two bewildered-looking children closer to her body, one on each side, using them as props. The boy perhaps 10, and his younger sister stared up at Marcus. Their faces were a complex mixture of acute embarrassment at their mother's outburst and a lingering, powerful curiosity. There was not a single shred of terror in their eyes. The boy clutched a small silver toy airplane in his hand, its wings glinting brightly in the afternoon sun. A man standing near Karen, a florid-faced individual named Tom with a phone already in his hand and recording, nodded vigorously in support. "She's right. I heard it too. Unsettling stuff to be talking about around kids. All about fighting and who knows what else." The murmuring in the crowd began to shift to curdle. It was no longer simple curiosity. It was the beginning of a schism, a division forming in the dust right at his feet. Some faces hardened with disapproval, but their gazes were fixed not on Marcus, but on the spectacle Karen was so deliberately creating. Others, however, began to look at Marcus with suspicion, their brows furrowed. Marcus felt a familiar cold weight settle deep in his gut. A flashback brief and unwelcome flickered behind his eyes, the oppressive absolute silence of a night patrol in a hostile village, the prickling sensation of unseen eyes watching from shadowy doorways. The enemy you could see, the one with a weapon in his hand, was one thing. The enemy you couldn't, the one that hid in plain sight and attacked with whispers and assumptions, was another beast entirely. He drew a slow, controlled breath, the kind he used before breaching a door, and pushed the memory back down into its box. "Ma'am, I assure you there was nothing threatening in my conversation." He repeated his tone, a monumental effort in sustained patience. "These children asked about the pin on my collar, and I was happy to share." He was in a simple navy polo shirt and jeans civilian clothes. The only hint of his past was a small, subtle silver pin on his collar, a miniature replica of his combat infantryman badge, an emblem of service, of sacrifice, an emblem of pride, not a threat. "Don't you dare try to play innocent." Karen's voice was now a ragged shriek. "I demand security. This man is making people uncomfortable. He's a danger to us all, Tom." Her newfound ally puffed out his chest and chimed in, his voice loud and carrying for the benefit of the surrounding phones. "Yeah. You see the way he stands, all rigid and intense. Probably has that PTSD or something. You know what they say. Those types are like ticking time bombs." The accusation hung in the thick, hot air, ugly and venomous. Marcus felt a muscle twitch violently in his jaw. The casual, ignorant weaponization of a condition that had claimed the lives of friends and haunted his own quiet, sleepless hours was a profound, soul-deep insult. He fought the primal, roaring urge to respond, to correct, to defend. His training, a voice of discipline inside him, screamed a single, clear directive: maintain composure. Do not escalate. The mission is control. The mission now, it seemed, was to survive a county fair. More phones were out, a small grove of black rectangles rising from the crowd, their lenses like unblinking eyes. Some were pointed at Karen, documenting her meltdown. But many, he noticed with a sinking heart, were pointed directly at him. He was no longer a man speaking to children. He was content, a spectacle, an incident. A young fair employee barely out of his teens hurried over his walkie-talkie, crackling with static. Is everything all right here?" he asked, his eyes wide as he flicked his gaze from Karen's contorted face to Marcus's stoic calm, to the growing, agitated crowd. He looked at Marcus with a strange flicker of apprehension, his hand hovering nervously near the radio on his belt. "No, it's not all right," Karen screeched, seizing on the arrival of a perceived authority figure. This man is harassing families. He's talking about war and deployments and weaponry. It's completely inappropriate. I want him escorted off the premises." Marcus let out a sigh, a deep, weary sound that came from a place far older than his 45 years. He had faced down armed insurgents, navigated minefields by moonlight, and endured interrogations in God-forsaken corners of the world. Yet, this felt different. This was a battle on home soil, a battlefield of whispers and assumptions, and it was infinitely, crushingly more disheartening. He glanced at the children, the ones he had been trying to inspire just moments before. Their innocent faces were now clouded with a confusion that was quickly curdling into genuine fear, not of him, but of the ugly, incomprehensible adult drama swirling around them. The murmur of dissent in the crowd grew louder, a countercurrent pushing back against Karen's tirade. "Leave him alone," a woman with a stroller called out. "He wasn't doing anything." "She's the one causing a scene," another man added, shaking his head. But Tom, Karen's cheerleader, stepped forward again. "Better safe than sorry. You don't know what people like him are capable of." The words, "people like him," hung in the air, charged and ugly, pregnant with insinuation. Karen, emboldened by his support, locked her eyes on the young employee. "Are you going to do your job or not? Call your security now, or I'll have your job." As if summoned by her manic cries, two uniformed security guards began making their way through the throng. One was older, with a weathered face, and the profoundly tired eyes of a man who had seen it all. The other was young, eager, with a stiff posture that bespoke inexperience and a desire to prove himself. Karen beamed a look of vindictive triumph spreading across her features. She raised her trembling finger again, pointing it directly at Marcus, like a prosecutor in a courtroom, as the guards approached. "That's him. He's the one. He was threatening children." Marcus stood his ground, a pillar of stillness in the swirling chaos. He met the guards' approaching gazes without flinching, his back straight, his shoulders squared. His conscience was clear. His heart, however, was heavy as lead. The guards reached the epicenter of the drama. The younger one, clearly influenced by Karen's frantic energy and Tom's aggressive posture, immediately took a confrontational stance. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with us," the young guard said, his voice tight with adrenaline. Before Marcus could even formulate a response, a woman pushed her way to the front of the inner circle. It was the mother of the boy with the toy airplane. "Wait," she said, her voice firm, but nearly drowned out by the noise. "He didn't do anything wrong. My son Leo was just asking him questions. He was being very kind." Her name was Lisa, and her words were a desperate attempt to inject a single drop of reason into the spreading madness. But Karen was having none of it. "He's brainwashing them. Officer, do your duty. He's a danger." Under the immense pressure of the gawking crowd, the sea of recording cameras, and Karen's relentless, piercing shrieks, the young guard made a decision. He reached for his handcuffs. "Sir, turn around and place your hands behind your back." The world seemed to slow down for Marcus, the sounds of the fair fading to a dull roar. The metallic click of the ratchet on the steel cuffs was deafening in the sudden silence of his mind. As the cold metal bit into the flesh of his wrist, the humid air of the Fresno Fair dissolved. It was replaced instantly by the cold, damp stone of a basement in a war-torn city, the air thick with the smell of mold and fear. Flashback. The rough scrape of a burlap sack being pulled over his head, plunging him into suffocating darkness. The sharp, metallic taste of his own blood and terror. The brutal binding of his wrists behind his back with a zip tie pulled so tight it cut off circulation. He was a prisoner, a hostage, his life hanging by the thinnest of threads, subject to the whims of his enemies. He flinched, an involuntary full-body shudder. It wasn't from the pressure of the guard's cuffs, but from the searing, vivid memory. The younger guard misinterpreted the movement as resistance. He tightened his grip, wrenching Marcus's arm back at a painful angle. "Stop resisting." The guard grunted, his face inches from Marcus's. "I'm not resisting." Marcus said, his voice dangerously low and steady, the calm facade beginning to crack, like stressed ice under the immense strain. It was at this precise moment of peak tension that a new element introduced itself to the volatile chemical reaction. A group of 4 young men, reeking of stale beer and cheap aggressive bravado, pushed their way through the crowd, drawn to the conflict, like moths to a raging flame. "Whoa! What's going on here?" One of them slurred, a stupid, predatory grin on his face. Putting the trash out, they saw Marcus, a tall black man in cuffs, flanked by security. Their drunken, simple minds made an ugly, instantaneous calculation. One of them, emboldened by the scene, stepped forward and shoved Marcus hard in the shoulder. "What did you do, Grandpa? Scare some kids with your big bad war stories?" The physical contact was a lit match dropped into a pool of gasoline. Marcus's entire body tensed, 22 years of honed combat training, screaming to the surface, overriding everything else. He could disable all 4 of them in less than 10 seconds, cuffs or no cuffs. The thought was not a boast. It was a simple, tactical fact. A palm heel strike to the first one's nose, a sidekick to the second's knee, used the third as a shield. The leader of the drunken group, seeing the fire in Marcus's eyes, seemed to take it as a challenge. He smirked, his hand dipping into his pocket. "Think you're tough, huh?" he snarled, and with a flick of his wrist produced a cheap 6-inch folding knife. The blade caught the afternoon sun with a wicked glint. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath. This was no longer a verbal spat. People scrambled backward, a wave of panic breaking the circle. Some screamed. A woman yelled, "He has a knife!" The older, more experienced security guard saw the lethal shift in Marcus's eyes. He saw the coiled spring of controlled violence about to be unleashed. He recognized the look of a man who had seen real combat and was about to bring it to the Fresno Fair. "Hey, back off!" he yelled at the drunk youths, finally stepping between them and Marcus. He drew his collapsible baton, the sharp thwack of it extending, echoing ominously through the chaos. The situation was a powder keg, and the fuse was lit. And then, a sound pierced through the anger, the fear, the slurred jeers, and the panicked shouts. It was the sound of a child crying, a raw, heartbroken wail of pure terror. Marcus's head snapped toward the sound. It was the little boy, Leo. His face was streaked with dirty tears, his small body trembling uncontrollably. The silver toy airplane had fallen from his hand and lay abandoned in the dust. He was looking at the whole nightmarish scene, at his mother, trying to shield his eyes, at the snarling men, at the guard with the baton, at the glinting knife, and at Marcus, the kind man from moments ago now in handcuffs. He was looking at a world that had suddenly become terrifying and violent. In that instant, everything inside Marcus went perfectly still. The rage, the indignation, the combat readiness, the memory of the basement, it all evaporated like mist. The mission parameters changed. It wasn't about survival. It wasn't about dominance or vindication. It was about the terrified face of that little boy. He unclenched his jaw. He forced the coiled muscles in his shoulders and back to relax. He let out a slow, deliberate breath and stood perfectly still, offering no resistance, his eyes fixed on the child. He would endure this. For him. "Stand down." The voice was a thunderclap. It wasn't a shout. It was a command forged in absolute authority and accustomed to instant, unquestioning obedience. It cut through every other sound, freezing every single person in place. The crowd, already parting from the knife, now opened up a wide pathway. A man strode through the opening. His posture was ramrod straight, his eyes like chips of hard granite. He wore a crisp, immaculate army dress uniform, the chest adorned with rows of ribbons and insignia that spoke of a long and storied career. As the man drew closer, a flicker of recognition sparked in Marcus's mind. Colonel Harris. What in the hell is he doing here? The colonel's presence radiated an unassailable authority that dwarfed the fair security guards. He ignored Karen. He ignored the gawking crowd and the youths with the now faltering bravado. His furious gaze landed on the young guard still holding the handcuffs attached to Marcus. "Soldier, what in the God-blessed name of the United States Army do you think you are doing?" The colonel roared, his voice a weapon in itself. The young guard visibly shrank, his face paling to a ghostly white. "Uncuff that man. Now." The guard fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking so badly he could barely fit the key into the lock. The cuffs fell away from Marcus's wrists. Colonel Harris stepped up to Marcus. His expression shifted instantly from fury to a profound, steely respect. He placed a firm, steadying hand on Marcus's shoulder. He then turned to the stunned, silent crowd. His voice boomed across the fairgrounds, no microphone needed. "You people want to know who this man is. You want to know what military talk is. Let me tell you." He pointed a rigid finger at Marcus. "This is Sergeant Major Marcus Jones. And the reason he is our guest of honor at this fair today is because in 30 minutes on that stage, he is being awarded the Medal of Valor." A collective gasp, a sound of pure shock rippled through the crowd. 7 years ago, the colonel continued, his voice ringing with power and fury in a valley outside Kandahar. Sergeant Major Jones's platoon was ambushed. They were outnumbered 3-1, pinned down by withering machine gun fire. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He single-handedly held off an enemy assault on their exposed flank, deliberately drawing their fire to himself so his men could scramble to a defensible position. He took 2 bullets for his trouble and kept fighting until every single one of his soldiers was safe. The silence was absolute, thick with awe, and a dawning collective shame. Then, Lisa Leo's mother stepped forward, fresh tears streaming down her face. She was holding up her phone, the screen displaying a grainy photo. "Colonel, that was my husband's platoon," she said, her voice choked with an overwhelming emotion. "My husband is alive today because of him." She looked at Marcus, her eyes filled with a gratitude so immense it was almost painful to witness. "My husband, Sergeant Miller, he sent me this. He told me to find you today and thank you for our lives. For our son." She handed her phone to Marcus. The photo was a still from a helmet cam. It showed a younger Marcus, his face a mask of pain and grim determination, carrying a badly wounded soldier, Sergeant Miller, over his shoulder through a haze of smoke and chaos. Karen's face had cycled through a spectacular spectrum of emotions, from vindictive triumph to confusion to disbelief and now to sheer dawning horror. Her carefully constructed reality was collapsing in real-time broadcast on 100 phone screens. Desperate, she made one last pathetic stand, her voice a weak, croaking rasp. "It's a lie. It has to be a lie. The medal is fake. They're all in on it. It's a conspiracy." A wave of boos, low and guttural, rose from the crowd, crashing over her. The sound was contemptuous, absolute. Her ally Tom, who had been filming everything, suddenly lowered his phone. His florid face was pale, his eyes wide with horror at what he had participated in. He took a hesitant step forward, not toward Karen, but toward Marcus. "Sir," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. I am so sorry. I was wrong. I'm ashamed. Please forgive me." He couldn't meet Marcus's eyes, staring instead at the dusty ground. At that moment, little Leo, no longer crying, pushed past his mother's legs. He walked directly up to the towering, silent figure of Sergeant Major Jones. In his small hand, he held the dusty toy airplane. He held it up to Marcus, an offering. "You're a hero," the boy said, his voice clear and true, cutting through the last vestiges of ugliness. The crowd erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was a roar of catharsis, of relief, of profound, heartfelt appreciation. It was the sound of a community finding its soul again. The older security guard, his face etched with regret, stepped forward and gently, but firmly, took Karen by the arm. "Ma'am," he said, his voice devoid of all sympathy. "I think it's time for you to leave." Karen, speechless and ashen-faced, offered no resistance. She was a ghost, a hollowed-out shell of her earlier fury, escorted away through a gauntlet of booing onlookers, her mortified children trailing in her wake of utter humiliation. On the main stage, minutes later, Marcus stood tall as Colonel Harris pinned the Medal of Valor to his navy polo shirt. The afternoon sun glinted off the polished gold. The roar of the crowd was a physical wave of warmth and gratitude washing over him, cleansing the filth of the last hour. He caught the eye of Lisa and Leo in the front row. The boy beamed, holding his silver toy plane high in the air, a miniature trophy. Marcus offered a small, genuine smile in return. The anger was gone, replaced by something quiet and warm. Later, away from the crowds, he held the printed copy of the photo Lisa had given him. He looked at the face of Sergeant Miller, then at his own younger, grimacing face. For 7 years, that memory had been a source of private pain, a scar on his soul. But now, seeing it through the eyes of the family he had saved, feeling the unexpected support of the community around him, it felt different. The sharp edges of the memory had softened. It felt like healing. The incident, born of a single screeching voice of prejudice, had paradoxically strengthened the fabric of the community. While the videos of Karen's downfall became a brief, fleeting tale of digital justice, that wasn't the story that endured. The enduring image, the one that truly mattered, was that of Sergeant Major Marcus Jones, a quiet man in a polo shirt, standing not as a victim, but as a beacon. And before him, a small boy, his face full of awe, holding up a silver airplane, learning not about war, but about what it truly means to be a hero.